My grandson took me aside, his childish eyes filled with horror, and whispered, "Grandpa, I've learned something terrible about my parents." What he told me shattered my whole world. I immediately called 911, my heart pounding with shock. 20 minutes later, the police arrived and arrested my son. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The door exploded open. Cleveland burst through without knocking, his expensive suit wrinkled from aggressive movement, papers clutched in his white-knuckled fist. The heavy oak door crashed against the wall with a bang that rattled the windows overlooking Lake Erie. I looked up from my quarterly reports, reading glasses sliding down my nose as I took in my son's flushed face. "Dad, enough!" Cleveland slammed a stack of legal documents onto my mahogany desk. Papers scattered across the surface, covering the financial projections I'd been reviewing. "You're too old for this, and you can't handle it anymore." I removed my glasses slowly, setting them down with deliberate care. 30 years of difficult negotiations had taught me the value of measured movements, though none of those deals had ever involved my own son standing before me like an adversary. "What exactly can't I handle, Cleveland?" My voice remained steady despite the storm brewing in my chest. He began pacing behind the chair across from my desk, his hands clenched into fists. "The company needs fresh leadership, modern thinking. You're stuck in the past, while competitors are racing ahead with digital innovation and aggressive expansion." Fresh leadership. The words stung more than they should have. I stood up slowly, my full height still impressive despite my 68 years. "And you believe you're ready to provide that leadership?" "I know I am." Cleveland stopped pacing and leaned forward, pressing his palms against my desk. The family photo of him graduating college trembled under the pressure. "I've been ready for years. You just refuse to see it because you can't let go." The late afternoon sunlight streaming through my office blinds cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look older, harder. When had my ambitious son become this demanding stranger? "Ready?" I kept my voice level, though anger was building like pressure behind a dam. "Yesterday you wanted to take out massive loans for untested technology. Last month you suggested firing half our workforce to boost short-term profits. That's not leadership, Cleveland. That's recklessness." His jaw tightened. "That's called adapting to survive. While you're protecting every employee like they're family members, our competitors are streamlining operations and maximizing returns. We could triple our revenue in 2 years if you'd just step aside." I walked around the desk until I stood directly in front of him. "And destroy everything I've built in the process?" "Everything we've built," he corrected, his voice rising. "I've worked here for 15 years. I know this business inside and out. The only thing holding Thompson Manufacturing back is your stubborn refusal to embrace change." The accusation hung in the air between us like smoke. I studied my son's face, searching for traces of the eager teenager who used to organize my tools in the garage, asking endless questions about every component and process. That boy had admired my work ethic and business philosophy. This man saw them as obstacles. "I'm not ready to retire, Cleveland. The company needs a leader who understands the 21st century." Cleveland's fist crashed down on my desk, making the brass nameplate jump. "I'm not asking permission anymore, Dad. I'm telling you how this is going to work." The office fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic 20 floors below. I felt something shift in my chest, a cold recognition of what this confrontation really meant. This wasn't a discussion about business strategy or succession planning. This was a declaration of war. "Is that a threat?" Cleveland straightened his tie and smoothed his jacket, composing himself with visible effort. "It's a reality check. You can make this transition graceful, or I can make it happen another way. But it's going to happen." He turned toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Think about it, Dad. Think about what's best for everyone." The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the window frames. I stood alone in my office, staring at the scattered legal documents that had started this confrontation. My hands weren't quite steady as I reached for my car keys. The 20-minute drive through Cleveland's quiet suburbs gave me too much time to replay Cleveland's words. "You're too old for this. I'm not asking permission anymore." By the time I pulled into my driveway in Shaker Heights, those phrases had worn grooves in my mind like a broken record. I hung my coat in the front closet with mechanical precision, my movements careful and controlled. The house felt unusually quiet after the office confrontation. No television chatter, no phone calls, just the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I poured 2 fingers of whiskey from the bar cart in my study, noting how my hands trembled slightly as I lifted the crystal decanter. Settling into my leather armchair, I found myself surrounded by decades of family memories. Wedding photos, vacation snapshots, Cleveland's high school graduation picture where he wore that proud smile. The same smile I'd seen when he organized my tools as a teenager, eager to learn every aspect of the business. When did everything change? My gaze drifted to the old company photos arranged on the bookshelf. There we were in 1995. Me standing in front of our tiny rented office space, Cleveland beside me with grease on his hands from helping move equipment. He'd been 22 then, fresh out of college but willing to start from the bottom. We'd work side by side until midnight, planning expansion strategies and celebrating small victories. I remembered those early sacrifices, missing family dinners because a client needed immediate attention, working 80-hour weeks to secure contracts that would keep us afloat, taking financial risks that kept me awake at night, knowing that failure would mean losing everything I'd promised my family. From that garage startup to 300 employees, from 20,000 in annual revenue to 20 million. Every milestone had been earned through careful planning, relationship building, and steady growth. Not the aggressive tactics Cleveland favored, but methodical progress that built lasting foundations. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I made it too easy for him. Cleveland had never experienced the uncertainty of those early years. He'd joined the company when success was already established, when paychecks were guaranteed and expansion was inevitable. He'd inherited confidence without earning wisdom, ambition without understanding the cost of failure. But was I being fair? Was I holding on to control because the company needed my guidance, or because I couldn't imagine my identity without it? The questions circled in my mind like vultures, picking at every decision I'd made in the past 5 years. I reached for my phone and dialed John Morrison's number. He'd been my business mentor for 3 decades, a friend who'd witnessed both my successes and mistakes. If anyone could provide objective perspective on this family crisis, it would be John. "Bill?" John's familiar voice carried warmth despite the late hour. "Everything all right?" Cleveland and I had a confrontation today. He wants immediate control of the company. I summarized the office scene without revealing how deeply Cleveland's words had shaken me. John was quiet for a moment. "Family business transitions are never simple. How do you feel about his readiness?" "Honestly, I think he's skilled but impatient. He wants to transform everything overnight without understanding the risks involved." I swirled the whiskey in my glass, watching amber liquid catch the lamplight. "But maybe I'm just afraid of change." "You've always been protective of your people and your principles. That's not a weakness, Bill. But Cleveland's generation approaches business differently. The question is whether his methods can preserve what you've built, while adapting to modern challenges." We talked for another 20 minutes, exploring scenarios and possibilities. John shared stories of other family businesses he'd observed, some successful transitions and others that had ended in permanent damage. By the end of our conversation, I felt validated in my concerns, but no closer to a solution. After hanging up, I finished my whiskey and checked my watch. 8:30. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and I needed rest before facing whatever Cleveland had planned next. I felt determined, but wary as I headed upstairs, like a general preparing for a battle he'd hoped to avoid. I arrived at the office early the next morning, needing time to restore order before the business day began. By 8:15, I'd reorganized my desk and cleared away the scattered papers from yesterday's confrontation. The morning sunlight slanted through my windows at a different angle, softer and more hopeful than the harsh afternoon glare that had illuminated Cleveland's angry face. A gentle knock interrupted my email review. Cleveland entered carrying a silver service tray with 2 coffee cups and a plate of pastries from the bakery near his house. His posture was subdued, apologetic, a stark contrast to yesterday's aggressive stance. "Dad, I brought coffee." He set the tray carefully on my desk, avoiding eye contact. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday. I was out of line." The aroma of fresh coffee filled the office, as Cleveland arranged the cups with deliberate care. His movements were measured, controlled, as if he'd rehearsed this entire approach. I watched him closely, analyzing every gesture for signs of genuine remorse or calculated manipulation. "I spent last night thinking about what you said," Cleveland continued, finally meeting my gaze. "You're right about patience and wisdom. I've been so focused on growth opportunities that I forgot to appreciate what you've already built." He sat down across from my desk instead of looming over it, his body language respectful rather than demanding. "I remembered something from when I was 16, organizing your tools in the garage. You told me that real success comes from understanding every component before trying to improve the machine." Did I say that? The specific memory felt familiar, though wrapped in the haze of countless father-son conversations over the years. Cleveland's reference to our shared past touched something deep in my chest, the parental pride that had driven my sacrifices for 3 decades. I accepted the coffee cup he offered, noting its perfect temperature and rich blend, my preferred roast from the shop Cleveland had discovered during his college years. "You've given this considerable thought. More than I should have needed to." Cleveland sipped his coffee, his demeanor calm and reflective. "I want to earn your trust, not demand it. If you're willing to work with me on a gradual transition plan, I promise to prove I can honor what Thompson Manufacturing represents." We spent the next hour discussing specific projects and responsibilities. Cleveland asked thoughtful questions about client relationships and manufacturing processes, showing genuine interest in details he'd previously dismissed as outdated methodology. He nodded enthusiastically when I outlined my vision for sustainable growth over the next 2 to 3 years. "I understand now that patience isn't the same as stagnation," Cleveland said, reviewing notes he'd taken during our conversation. "Your approach builds lasting foundations instead of temporary profits." The coffee tasted rich and warming, carrying hints of chocolate and caramel that reminded me of successful morning meetings from years past. Cleveland agreed with every suggestion I made, acknowledging the wisdom in gradual expansion and employee loyalty programs. His transformation seemed almost too perfect, but I wanted desperately to believe it was real. "There's a project with Morrison Industries that would be perfect for you to lead," I said, feeling cautiously optimistic about our relationship's future. "It involves the kind of innovative thinking you've always championed, but within established frameworks that protect our core values." Cleveland's eyes lit up with what appeared to be genuine excitement. "I'd be honored to take that on. Thank you for trusting me with something so important." As our meeting concluded, Cleveland gathered the empty coffee cups and pastry plate, promising to earn the company rather than inherit it. His humility seemed authentic, and for the first time in months, I felt hope that we could bridge the gap between his ambition and my experience. I watched him leave my office carrying the silver tray with the same careful attention he'd shown throughout our conversation. The bitter aftertaste from my coffee lingered slightly, but I dismissed it as normal, probably just the difference between office brewing and professional preparation. For now, I allowed myself to feel optimistic about our family's future. 5:45 arrived with the same punctuality I'd maintained for 30 years. I saved the quarterly projection spreadsheet and reached for my coat hanging behind the office door. Standing triggered the first wave, a sudden dizziness that sent me grabbing for the desk edge as papers scattered to the hardwood floor. This isn't normal fatigue. The room tilted slightly, like stepping off a carousel too quickly. I pressed my palm against the cool wood surface, waiting for equilibrium to return. The air conditioning's steady hum seemed amplified, competing with an unexpected ringing in my ears. Nausea followed the dizziness, rolling through my stomach in slow, persistent waves. I loosened my tie and unbuttoned my collar, suddenly desperate for air despite the office's comfortable temperature. My hands trembled as I reached for the water bottle beside my computer monitor. What's happening to me? I attempted standing again, but my legs felt disconnected from my intentions. The familiar view of Lake Erie through my windows wavered like heat mirages, and a metallic taste coated my tongue. This wasn't stress or overwork. Something was genuinely wrong. The intercom button required 2 attempts before I could think clearly enough to give the taxi driver my address and handle the payment with steady hands. As we pulled away from Thompson Manufacturing's parking garage, I studied the familiar downtown Cleveland skyline through the rear window. 30 years of building that company, and now my own body was betraying me at the moment when everything should have been falling into place with Cleveland's newfound maturity. The taxi driver glanced at me through his rearview mirror. "You all right back there, sir?" "Fine, thank you." I gripped the door handle for stability as we turned onto the highway toward Shaker Heights. The late afternoon sunlight felt too bright, forcing me to close my eyes and lean back against the headrest. Tomorrow will be better. It has to be. The taxi driver helped me navigate the front steps to my house, accepting an extra 20 for his patience. Inside, the familiar comfort of my own space provided immediate psychological relief, even if my body continued its rebellion against whatever was affecting me. I made myself light dinner, chicken soup from a can and saltine crackers, the kind of meal reserved for actual illness. Sitting in my living room chair, I felt marginally better. The nausea had subsided to occasional waves, rather than constant churning, and my hands had stopped their persistent trembling. Early bedtime will solve this. Tomorrow, I'll be back to normal. By 10:30, I was under the covers in my familiar bedroom, expecting the restorative sleep that had always served me well. The digital clock's red numbers provided the only light as I settled into my usual position. 11:45 brought me awake with renewed vengeance. The nausea returned with compound interest, accompanied by a pounding headache that felt like construction work inside my skull. I stumbled to the bathroom for water and aspirin, gripping the doorframe for support. 1:20 brought the second awakening. The headache had intensified, and now cold sweats joined the symphony of symptoms. I sat on the bathroom floor, pressing my cheek against the cool tile wall, waiting for another wave to pass. 3:15 delivered the worst episode yet, dry heaving over the toilet bowl while my head felt like it might split apart. Every position was uncomfortable. Every movement brought fresh misery. I found myself sitting on the bed's edge, staring at the clock and counting minutes between symptoms. This isn't normal. This isn't aging or stress or overwork. I retrieved my home blood pressure monitor from the nightstand drawer. The reading showed elevated numbers. Not dangerous, but higher than my usual baseline. My temperature registered slightly above normal, though not quite fever territory. 4:30 found me making mental lists for the doctor I'd avoided for 2 years. Symptom onset, late afternoon. Duration, ongoing. Severity, moderate to severe. Possible causes, food poisoning, viral infection, stress reaction, medication interaction, aging-related episode. I avoided internet research, knowing the rabbit hole of self-diagnosis that awaited. Instead, I focused on observable facts. The timeline, the specific sensations, the gradual progression from minor discomfort to significant illness. Dawn arrived at 6 o'clock with modest improvement. The headache had dulled to manageable levels, and my stomach felt stable enough for movement. I showered with careful deliberation, letting hot water wash away the night's misery. Fresh clothes felt like armor against continued illness. Toast and weak tea constituted breakfast, bland fuel for whatever challenges the day might bring. I'd make a doctor's appointment if symptoms persisted, but first I needed to handle whatever business emergencies might have accumulated overnight. The drive to Thompson Manufacturing required extra concentration. I gripped the steering wheel firmly, taking corners with unusual caution. Cleveland's red sedan was already in the parking lot when I arrived, which struck me as either coincidental or concerningly thoughtful. By 9:30, I'd managed to review 3 urgent emails and sign 2 contracts, despite the lingering fog in my head. The previous night's ordeal had left me functioning at perhaps 70% capacity, but functioning nonetheless. I massaged my temples, trying to clear the persistent haze when Cleveland's gentle knock interrupted my concentration. "Morning, Dad." He entered carrying an elaborate coffee service, not just cups, but a thermal carafe, assorted pastries, and what appeared to be vitamin supplements arranged on a silver tray. "You look a bit pale. Everything okay?" The coffee's rich aroma hit my stomach like a physical blow. My body recoiled with surprising intensity, as if recognizing some threat my conscious mind couldn't identify. "Not today, son. Still feeling under the weather." Cleveland's expression flickered. Disappointment? Frustration? The emotion passed too quickly for me to analyze properly, replaced by exaggerated concern that seemed almost theatrical in its intensity. What kind of symptoms? He set the tray down and leaned forward with medical curiosity. Hope has nursing experience, you know. She might have suggestions if you described what you're experiencing. General malaise, headache, nausea, fatigue. I kept the description minimal, not wanting to appear weak when the company needed strong leadership. Probably just pushed myself too hard lately. Or maybe you need proper nutrition and family support. Cleveland's pivot seemed rehearsed, as if he'd prepared multiple conversation paths. Hope's making her famous healing pot roast tonight. Why don't you join us for dinner? Ethan's been asking about Grandpa. The mention of my grandson tugged at exactly the right heartstring. I hadn't seen Ethan in 2 weeks, and the boy's enthusiasm always lifted my spirits during difficult periods. Cleveland seemed to sense the emotional leverage working. She has these special recipes from her nursing days, foods that actually help recovery instead of just filling your stomach. Cleveland wrote something on his business card, sliding it across my desk. 7 o'clock? Hope insists that proper family meals cure more ailments than most medications. My logical mind noted the timing was somewhat convenient, inviting the sick relative for home-cooked medicine. But Ethan's face appeared in my thoughts, along with Hope's genuine warmth during family gatherings. My isolation last night had been miserable. Company might provide the comfort I needed. That sounds wonderful. Thank you for thinking of me. I pocketed the card with their Westlake address. Tell Hope I appreciate her concern. Cleveland gathered the untouched coffee service with movements that seemed slightly hurried, though his smile remained perfectly calibrated. She'll be thrilled. Ethan's been working on a drawing project he wants to show you. I'm looking forward to it. Despite my continued physical discomfort, the prospect of family time provided genuine emotional relief. 7 o'clock sharp. After Cleveland left, I remained at my desk holding his handwritten invitation. The gesture felt simultaneously generous and oddly convenient. My son had never shown particular interest in my health before, yet here he was providing medical consultation and therapeutic dinner invitations within 24 hours of my sudden illness. Gratitude and suspicion make uncomfortable bedfellows. I tucked the card into my jacket pocket, already anticipating Ethan's excitement and Hope's nurturing attention to my recovery. The 30-minute drive through Cleveland's suburbs to Westlake helped clear my head despite the lingering fatigue from yesterday's mysterious illness. Cleveland's contemporary home sat on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees, its well-maintained exterior reflecting the prosperity Thompson Manufacturing had provided our family. Ethan burst through the front door before I could ring the bell, his 10-year-old energy a stark contrast to my careful movements up the walkway. "Grandpa!" He wrapped his arms around my waist with the fierce affection that made every sacrifice worthwhile. "There's my favorite grandson." I ruffled his sandy hair, feeling genuine joy for the first time in 2 days. "What have you been up to?" The aroma of roasting meat and herbs drifted from the kitchen where Hope and Cleveland were preparing what promised to be an elaborate dinner. Through the open floor plan, I could see them working in synchronized efficiency, Hope stirring something on the stove while Cleveland arranged place settings with unusual precision. "Come see my new game, Grandpa." Ethan tugged me toward the living room couch, his excitement infectious despite my physical weariness. "It's about building cities and managing resources." We settled onto the comfortable sectional, Ethan explaining the game's complex rules, with the patience of someone who'd clearly been looking forward to this demonstration. His enthusiasm temporarily pushed aside my concerns about the lingering weakness in my hands and the occasional wave of nausea that still visited without warning. "Dinner in 20 minutes, Cleveland called from the kitchen, his voice carrying forced cheerfulness that seemed slightly strained. "Hope's making her famous healing pot roast specifically for Dad's recovery." Ethan's excitement faltered slightly. He glanced toward the kitchen, then back at the game controller in his hands. Something in his expression shifted, a nervousness I hadn't noticed before, as if the mention of dinner had triggered an uncomfortable memory. "Everything okay, buddy?" I studied his face, noting how he'd started fidgeting with the controller's buttons without actually playing. Hope appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "How are you feeling, Bill? Any improvement since yesterday? Her concern appeared genuine, though something in her eyes seemed to be evaluating my response, rather than simply caring about my welfare. Better, thank you. This family time is exactly what I needed. I smiled at her, though Ethan's continued nervous fidgeting was beginning to concern me more than my own physical discomfort. Grandpa, Ethan said suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper, I need to tell you something very important. He set down the controller and turned to face me directly, his young face serious in a way that seemed far too mature for his age. What is it, son? I leaned closer, instinctively lowering my voice to match his. Ethan glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me. I heard my parents talking about putting drops in your food. They said it would make you sick, so you'd give them the company. His words came out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them inside for too long. The world stopped. Everything I thought I knew about family loyalty, about Cleveland's newfound maturity, about Hope's nurturing concern, crumbled in the space between one heartbeat and the next. What exactly did you hear? Mom was mixing something into soup. Dad said it would make you weak so you couldn't run the business anymore. Ethan's hands trembled as he spoke. They're trying to hurt you, Grandpa. I don't want them to hurt you. I took his small hands in mine, feeling their trembling match my own internal earthquake. You did the right thing telling me. Can you promise me something very important? He nodded solemnly. Don't tell your parents we had this conversation. Let me handle this, okay? You're safe, and I'm going to make sure we're both protected. I squeezed his hands gently. I need to use the bathroom for a minute. The guest bathroom provided the privacy I desperately needed to process what Ethan had revealed. I locked the door with deliberate quiet, my hands no longer trembling from illness, but from controlled rage. My son, my own blood, was attempting to murder me for a company I'd built to secure his future. I pulled out my cell phone, checking the signal strength before dialing 911. Every sound from the kitchen felt amplified. Hope's humming, Cleveland's cabinet doors opening and closing, the ordinary sounds of a family preparing dinner that now carried sinister undertones. 911, what's your emergency? My son is trying to poison me. The words felt surreal leaving my mouth, but Ethan's frightened confession left no room for doubt. I'm at his house right now, 1247 Oak Street in Westlake. Sir, are you in immediate danger? They're preparing dinner. My grandson overheard them discussing putting something in my food. I kept my voice low but clear, one ear listening for footsteps approaching the bathroom door. They've been doing this for 2 days. I need officers here immediately. We're dispatching units to your location. Can you avoid eating anything they offer you? Yes, I can delay. But please hurry. There's a child here, my 10-year-old grandson. He's the one who warned me. The dispatcher's professional questions helped me organize the crucial details. Exact address, number of people in the house, whether weapons were present. Units are en route. Estimated arrival in 15 minutes. Sir, remain calm and avoid any confrontation. Do not let them know you've called police. I flushed the toilet and ran water in the sink, maintaining the illusion of normal bathroom usage while my mind raced through the implications. Cleveland's aggressive demand for control, Hope's medical knowledge, the convenient timing of yesterday's illness after their morning coffee ritual. Every piece now fitted into a horrifying pattern. Checking my appearance in the mirror, I forced my expression into neutral territory. In 15 minutes, my family would be destroyed, but Ethan would be safe. That had to be enough. I opened the door and stepped back into the hallway, just as Cleveland called from the dining room. Dad, come join us. Hope has everything ready, and it smells incredible. The man calling me to dinner was the same one who'd organized my tools as a teenager, who'd asked endless questions about business strategy, who'd hugged me at his wedding and cried when Ethan was born. Now he was calculating the dosage needed to kill his own father. I walked toward the dining room with steady steps, preparing for the performance of my lifetime. Cleveland had transformed their dining room into an elaborate dinner theater, complete with cloth napkins and the good china Hope usually reserved for holidays. Steam rose from serving bowls arranged around a centerpiece of fresh flowers, creating an atmosphere of celebration that made my stomach churn for reasons having nothing to do with lingering illness. The guest of honor takes the head of the table, Cleveland announced with theatrical flourish, guiding me to the chair facing the kitchen. Hope ladled soup into my bowl with particular attention, her movements precise and deliberate, as she added what appeared to be extra herbs from a small container beside the stove. "I've included special healing spices just for you," Hope explained, her nursing background lending authority to her words. "These particular herbs are excellent for digestive issues and general weakness." Ethan took his seat across from me, our eyes meeting briefly before he looked down at his own bowl. The fear in his young face was barely contained, and I knew he was watching every move his parents made with the same horrified fascination I now felt. "To family healing and new beginnings." Cleveland raised his water glass in toast, waiting for everyone else to follow suit. "May this meal restore Dad's strength and bring us closer together." The irony was suffocating. I lifted my glass but avoided drinking, noting how Cleveland's eyes tracked my every movement. When Hope placed the soup bowl directly in front of me, the aromatic steam carried an undertone I couldn't identify, something bitter beneath the familiar scents of beef and vegetables. "I'm not very hungry tonight," I said politely, pushing the bowl slightly away from me. "Still feeling a bit off from yesterday." "But you need nourishment to recover properly." Cleveland's concern sounded genuine until I noticed the slight edge creeping into his voice. "Hope spent hours preparing this specifically for your condition." "The soup contains nutrients your body desperately needs," Hope added, moving closer to my chair. "Without proper nutrition, your immune system can't fight whatever's been making you sick." I maintained my polite refusal, but Cleveland's patience was clearly deteriorating. His jaw tightened when I declined a second time, and I caught him exchanging worried glances with Hope. Their careful plan was unraveling because their victim refused to cooperate. "Dad, you have to eat something." Cleveland's voice carried a new authority, the tone he'd used during our office confrontation. "You've been sick for 2 days. This soup will help." I said I'm not hungry. My response came out firmer than I'd intended, and I saw both Cleveland and Hope stiffen at my resistance. The sound of car doors slamming outside broke through our increasingly tense standoff. Heavy footsteps approached the front walkway, followed by an authoritative knock that made everyone at the table freeze. "Police! Open the door!" Cleveland's face went white. "Who called the police?" His question came out as an accusation, his eyes moving between Hope and me with dawning comprehension. Hope dropped her soup ladle with a clatter that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent house. Ethan slipped from his chair and moved closer to me, seeking protection from whatever was about to unfold. The knocking grew more insistent. "This is Westlake Police Department. We need to speak with the residents immediately." "Cleveland Thompson, open this door immediately." The commanding voice left no room for negotiation. Cleveland stumbled toward the front entrance, his face draining of color, as Hope dropped her serving spoon with a clatter that echoed through our suddenly silent dining room. 3 officers entered with professional efficiency, their badges gleaming under our chandelier's warm light. The lead detective surveyed our dinner scene with trained eyes, taking in the formal table setting, the steaming bowls, and our frozen tableau of guilty parties and protected victim. "Sir, we received a report of attempted poisoning at this address." Detective Martinez addressed me directly, while his colleagues moved to strategic positions around the room. "Are you William Thompson?" "I am." Relief flooded through me as I stood slowly, keeping one protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Thank you for responding so quickly." Cleveland's protests began immediately. "This is ridiculous. What poisoning? We're having a family dinner." His voice cracked with desperation as the detective photographed our table setting before anyone could disturb the evidence. "Everyone step away from the dinner table, please." Detective Martinez's partner began collecting samples from each bowl, paying particular attention to mine. "We'll need to test these contents immediately." Hope stood frozen beside the stove, watching in horror as a crime scene technician opened her special herb container and documented its contents with methodical precision. "I don't understand what's happening," she whispered, though her trembling hands suggested otherwise. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." Detective Martinez approached Cleveland with handcuffs ready. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." "Dad," Cleveland's eyes found mine across the room as the handcuffs clicked into place. "How could you do this to your own family?" The irony was staggering. "I could ask you the same question, son." Hope's arrest followed within minutes, her nursing background making her equally culpable in their poisoning scheme. Neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk outside, drawn by the police cars and flashing lights that had transformed our quiet suburban street into a crime scene. Ethan pressed closer to me as his parents were escorted past us toward the front door. Cleveland stopped and turned back, his face a mixture of shock and desperate appeal. "Forgive me, Dad. I never meant for it to go this far." "You meant to kill me, Cleveland. That's exactly how far you intended it to go." The detective assured me that Ethan could remain in my custody, pending formal arrangements, and within an hour we were driving away from the house that had become a symbol of family betrayal. My grandson fell asleep in the passenger seat before we reached the highway, exhausted by the emotional upheaval that had torn his world apart. 20 minutes later, I carried him into my house in Shaker Heights, tucking him into the guest bedroom that would become his permanent home. The court date card in my jacket pocket represented the next phase of our journey toward justice. 8 days later, the Cuyahoga County Courthouse felt like a cathedral of justice, as Ethan and I climbed its stone steps toward the third-floor courtroom, where Cleveland and Hope would face the consequences of their choices. My grandson's small hand gripped mine tightly, his courage remarkable for someone so young. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Williams." The bailiff's voice filled the formal courtroom as families, lawyers, and court personnel rose in unison. Across the aisle, Cleveland and Hope sat with their defense attorneys, both looking diminished by orange jumpsuits and the weight of overwhelming evidence. The state of Ohio versus Cleveland Thompson and Hope Thompson attempted murder in the first degree. Judge Williams reviewed the charges with grave authority before nodding to the prosecutor. "Counselor, you may present your opening statement." The prosecution methodically presented laboratory reports confirming toxic substances in the soup samples, medical testimony about my symptoms correlating with poisoning timelines, and physical evidence from Cleveland's kitchen that painted an undeniable picture of premeditated murder. "Mr. Thompson, please state your relationship to the defendants." The prosecutor guided me through my testimony with careful precision. "Cleveland is my son. Hope is my daughter-in-law." Speaking those words in a courtroom felt surreal, as if I were describing strangers rather than people who had shared 30 years of family dinners and birthday celebrations. "Tell the court what happened on the evening of June 12th. I recounted the dinner invitation, Ethan's warning, and the desperate pressure to consume food I now knew was poisoned. "My own son tried to murder me for control of my company. If not for my grandson's courage, I would be dead." The defense attorney's cross-examination proved futile against such clear evidence. "Mr. Thompson, isn't it possible you misunderstood your grandson's innocent observation? 10-year-old children don't imagine conversations about putting drops in their grandfather's food to make him sick." Ethan's testimony came via closed-circuit television to protect him from courtroom trauma. With a victim's advocate beside him, he answered questions with startling clarity. "I heard Mom mixing something special for Grandpa. Dad said it would make him too weak to run the company anymore." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Judge Williams's sentencing carried the weight of moral authority. Family relationships are built on trust, love, and protection. You violated those sacred bonds for financial gain. I sentence each defendant to 8 years in state prison. Cleveland's final words echoed across the courtroom. "Dad, forgive me. I lost my way completely." I watched them being escorted away, feeling justice served but no satisfaction in watching my son disappear behind bars. 4 days after the trial, I sat in my Thompson manufacturing office, reviewing legal documents with a perspective forever changed by family betrayal. The familiar photos of company milestones now carried different meaning. Success meant nothing without people you could trust to share it. My estate attorney spread new paperwork across the mahogany desk, where Cleveland had once scattered his demands for immediate control. These revisions ensure Ethan inherits the company at 25, with professional management until then. Remove Cleveland's name from all corporate documents. The decision felt both necessary and heartbreaking. Establish educational funds for Ethan's business training, but no pressure to join the company unless he chooses. At 4 o'clock, I drove to Edgewater Park, overlooking Lake Erie, where Ethan and I had developed our evening routine of watching sunsets and discussing his adjustment to living with his grandfather. The same lake view from my office window now provided a peaceful setting for healing conversations. "Grandpa, do you think Mom and Dad still love me?" Ethan's innocent question carried the weight of a child, trying to understand adult betrayal. "They love you very much. They made terrible choices about money and power, but their love for you was never in question." I kept my arm around his shoulders as we watched boats navigate the distant waters. Sometimes people lose sight of what matters most. We talked about his new school enrollment, weekend activities, and his gradual understanding that living with me wasn't temporary. Ethan's resilience amazed me daily, his ability to find joy despite everything that had happened. "Will I run the company someday?" "Only if you want to. You'll have many choices, and I'll support whatever makes you happy." The sunset painted everything golden as we sat together on our favorite bench. "The most important thing I can teach you is that real wealth comes from relationships built on trust." Walking back to our car hand in hand, I felt lighter than I had in years. Justice had been served, family bonds had been tested and strengthened where they mattered most, and the future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities I'd never imagined. Ethan's laughter at my suggestion of ice cream for dinner reminded me that some family traditions were worth preserving, while others needed to be created fresh. We had work to do, healing to continue, and a new kind of family legacy to build together. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,